Hey everybody, it's Ardith. Today I have a fun interactive card using some Essentials by Ellen goodies. I used some dies to make a fun layered beach scene, and then I added a special message for a friend I haven't seen in a long time. So let's dive right in. I started by creating my waterline with one of the Waves border dies and some masking paper. I kept both sides of the masks because once I created my water, I would need to mask the water to create the other layers. I blended Fiesta blue ink from Catherine Pooler all over the lower portion of my white cardstock, and I left it rough. I always think it's fun if water has a bit of texture to it, so I don't worry about getting a smooth blend. This is completely different than coming in softly and building up color when you want a nice gradual blend. I went over the Fiesta blue with suede shoes with the same rough technique, and I didn't even worry about covering all of the lighter blue. This will give my water more texture, and the variation of color will give it a bit of a glow. Now that portion of the cardstock is quite wet from all that ink, and in my experience, masking paper won't stick to it. So I skipped the next layer and I went right to the top of my panel to do the sky. I'm going to have some grass on my shore, so I used one of the landscape dies here for some spiky edges, and I pressed the masking paper down firmly so I won't have any of those little edges lifting up as I blend my sky. I also used the clouds die set to cut 3 clouds from the masking paper, and I put them down in the sky before I started blending It's a Boy ink. This time I did want a smoother blend, and I find that using a bigger brush and a lighter hand will help with that. And I remembered the bigger brush, but I seem to have forgotten the lighter hand part, and I ended up with a little more texture in the sky than I really wanted. When I removed the mask, I had a white strip in the center of my cardstock. This is where I'll put the sand and the grass. I masked the water with the other side of the masking paper mask I created earlier, and then I used a gentle curve from the landscape dies to mark off where the sand will end. Now Catherine has an ink color called Sandcastle, but I wanted my sand to be a little warmer than that, so I did some custom mixing and I added shea butter to it. And then I made a mistake. I forgot that the ink on my mini media mat would of course still be wet, and I got some dark blue in my sand. I took a minute to clean off the mat, and then I just went back into my blending. I started with the shea butter, and then I went back in with the Sandcastle. I love that you can customize your colors like this to come up with the shade you want. I put the 2 final masks on so I could blend my grass. The curve was easy, and then I realized I was going to need to figure out how to match up the grass. It actually only took me a second to find one piece of grass that was quite distinctive from the rest. I bet that clever Julie planned it that way when she designed this die. Lining it up was really easy after that. I used sage ink for my grass because I'll be using it again in a minute for my focal point. This time I really did want it soft, so I blended it onto the mask first to remove a lot of the ink from the brush before blending it into the little line of grass on my scene. When I removed the masks, I had a fun layered up beach scene. These colors will soften slightly as they dry. Before I moved on, I did feel like the water was too flat, so I used the mask to create some more waves in it. Next, my focal point. I wanted to create a message in a bottle, so I got out the bottle of Bubbly die set. I wanted to try and make the message look like it was inside the bottle, and I thought for quite a bit about how to do that. I started by using one of the smallest essential rectangles to create a mask, and I placed it on the center of the bottle vertically. Then I created another custom color of ink by using mandarin spice and over coffee on the little cork piece. This combination gives a nice rich warm brown color, which works well for this. Because the piece is so small, I just pushed it into the ink pad to color it. I cleaned the ink off the media mat before blending sage ink over the bottle. See, sometimes I do learn. I want it to be quite heavy along the edges and to lighten up quite a bit in the center. This will give the bottle a rounded appearance, as well as looking like light is reflecting off it. For the message, I didn't want it to be stark white. Then it would look like a label on the outside rather than a message on the inside. So I removed the mask and went very lightly over it with the same ink. What do you think? I'm pretty pleased with it. Then I went carefully over just the very edges of the bottle with spruce ink to darken it up even more and give it more dimension. And before I put the brushes away, I masked off part of the cork and blended green ink onto the bottom half of it, so it'll look like that portion is inside the bottle. I used my Misty and a hello sentiment from the new Essentials by Ellen set, It's All Good, for my message. Before I stamped it, I had to think about how this would look on the card front. So I got out the background and I played around a bit with positioning the bottle and deciding how I thought the sentiment should be stamped. Then I used Gina K Amalgam ink and my mini Misty to stamp it on the piece of paper inside the bottle. Next, I colored in the outline letters with a black Copic, and this is one thing I would have changed. Black made it very legible, but I think a deep gray would also have been legible, but it would have looked a little less crisp and more like it was inside the bottle. Finally, I grabbed my white gel pen and I added a small highlight on that one side to look like shine. When I placed the bottle back on my beach scene, it looked like it was in the air rather than in the water. I thought about cutting the water so I could slide the bottle in a bit, but then I had a better idea, and I got out that same old mask and I blended some blue ink onto the corner of the bottle. This makes the bottle look like it's in the water, but it leaves that corner free for my next idea. Because of course a bottle in the water would be bobbing along and not be completely still, right? So I got out my very last wobbler and I put it on the back of the bottle. And of course I had to give it a test drive. I hope you enjoyed seeing this card come together. I think it's a fun design to send to someone I haven't seen for a while. It has quite a masculine look, but you could easily change it up to work for the person you have in mind. I've linked all the supplies below if you're interested. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.